program will begin shortly. Launch sequence. Activate. Warning, the following content is not politically correct. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to the channel today, everyone. I'm your host, Sarah Higdon. This is Transform to Freedom. Yeah, sorry, I was off last week. I woke up Monday morning, wasn't feeling so great, so I took it easy most of the day. But yeah, and I could have done the show, but I was just, yeah, I wasn't feeling so great that day. So I was like, we're gonna take it easy and relax a little bit tonight. But we're back this week. Got some stuff to talk about. Lots in the news. Lots coming up. Yeah, I mean, let's get into it. So there was an interesting post. I just saw it months ago, and I didn't even pay attention to it. Actually, I guess it was on April 30th, during the Trump's cabinet meeting. And this is something I've talked about. Ooh, 1 second. I mean, so this is something that I've talked about for quite a while. If you followed me, and actually, if you watched my episode with Candace Horback last week, which you should go watch that episode, as well as go to Free the People, and you can see an episode I did, the first episode of Sienna Mayheath's new show called Real Unity. We talked about all the issues, talked about some of the issues that we had, the first time we ever interacted, then the first time we met, and how she didn't even care for me. She didn't even want to meet me the first time we were supposed to be on a panel together. And it is an interesting conversation between the two of us, and the whole point of the show is talking about people, talking about stuff from different sides of the political spectrum and different views, and trying to get an understanding of how other people think and everything like that. So that's a great episode. And like I said, the episode I did in person with Candace Horback was really fun. If you know, I've done chatting with Candace before, but this time it was in person. First time I had met Candace in person, and it was just lovely. It was a great experience, and I'm glad I was able to get out there and do that. But one of the things we did actually talk about, we talked about what I've talked a lot about when it comes to how therapy is not the right answer. I wish therapists would be more like life coaches rather than, the idea of therapists. How they, I told y'all about Abigail Schreier's book. What is it? Bad Therapy. And so we talked a little bit about that, me and Candace did, and we talked about the way that they're prescribing SSRIs on a mass scale to people, or they're just throwing puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones at issues without really doing any of the without really getting to the root cause of stuff. We're just throwing pills at stuff. Grasshopper, no. She did write Irreversible Damage, but this book I'm specifically talking about is her latest book, which is called Bad Therapy. And I read it, I guess I listened to the audiobook a few months ago. It was a great book. I actually recommend going because it's a lot of the same stuff that I've talked about when it comes to the mental health community. However, it ties in, like it makes more of it make sense. It connects some of the dots that I hadn't connected in the past, and what's really going on and why we're seeing such an issue with some of the therapists out there, and why therapy doesn't necessarily seem to work, or why people are being placed on drugs and everything like that. While at the same time, I advocate heavily for psychedelic treatment. Y'all know, I believe in. I believe psychedelics can be a wonderful tool. They've been known to, 3 sessions of LSD psychotherapy has been known to have lasting effects for PTSD for over a year. Mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms have done wonders with like my anxiety and stuff like that. So I'm a huge advocate, and so I saw this post from this cabinet meeting, and this is the new Trump's new VA director, which we've talked about it before. So RFK Jr. has talked about using psychedelics himself, and the multitude of benefits with lower side effects from psychedelics than you have from SSRIs, and how they are cleaner and potentially safer. I mean, they're still being studied, so I don't want to put out too much that could be that's not necessarily fact. But the thing is he wants to study them more, and I would love to see this administration deschedule, which it seems like Donald Trump himself may be in favor of descheduling psilocybin, as well as what is it, marijuana or cannabis for at least medical use. And so and which would be I mean, descheduling would be the number one thing to do, right? It's a plant that grows naturally in the ground, and you're literally, it's a natural medicine, which is really crazy, because I found this clip after everybody was going after the new or President Trump's selection for Surgeon General, which is Casey Means, which I was surprised at some of the people that were going after Casey, because they had worked together on different stuff. But they were going after her for saying that both the twins had used psychedelics, and talking about their psychedelic use, and as if because it was illegal, it was somehow bad. And I'm like, just because it's illegal doesn't mean you shouldn't try it if it helps with mental. Legality doesn't make a difference when it comes to beneficial use. Okay, I'm not saying go break the law right now. Don't go out there and buy, because it is illegal and you can get in trouble for using. But the idea that you're going to despair somebody for trying something that has been shown to have benefits, mental health benefits, that this administration seems to support, at least supporting this various studies on this, I think it's really interesting. And so I found this clip not long after that, where this is the new VA director, secretary, VA director of the VA, secretary of the VA. Well, this is what he said.
Thank you, Doug. How are you doing with the suicide rates? We're getting it's tough, Mr. President. That's something we're looking at. This is something that we've had $588 million has been spent over the last 4 or 5 years to be prevention, and yet the numbers stayed at 17 or 21, wherever you want to have it. We're now opening that back up, taking in nonprofits. We're bringing in others who have things that are actually looking at. I've worked with Secretary Kennedy and others on the idea of we're opening up the possibility of psychedelic treatment, and others that give us an opportunity. We got to research it, make sure it's good, but it's opening up that possibility. Thank you, Doug. How are you doing with the suicide rates? We're getting
the VA is looking at opening up the use of psychedelics to treat veterans with PTSD to potentially lower the suicidality rate of veterans, which I think is awesome. I think it's great. He said he's working with Secretary Kennedy on that, and they're going to study it. And Trump seems open to it, which makes you hopeful that maybe we can deschedule. We can deschedule these plant-based medicines that, according to the research, seem to have a multitude of benefits when it comes to mental health, and that way we're not throwing SSRIs at everything. So this was really encouraging, since this has been one of the things I've talked about for a few years now. But we'll move on from there. Let me see. Okay, so we talked about Epstien, the Epstein list, a couple weeks ago, and then and how the administration's seemingly dragging their tails and not wanting to put out the Epstein files and put out the list and everything like that. And now you have Dan Bongino and Kash Patel come out and in a one-on-one interview. What most are saying is basically flipping their opinions, like doing a complete 180 to what they were saying before they got into office. So here's what they said about whether Epstein did commit suicide.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to get, I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
You said Jeffrey Epstein.
So obviously a lot of people in the comments when talking about this is they don't believe it. They think that these two have been swayed, that the deep state is bigger than we thought and more powerful than we thought. Who knows? But what it is, like, I mean, I said they could have went, you know, the powers that be could have taken them in the same skiff that they took Mike Johnson in, where he's flipped his opinion, and showed him showed them the information there. However, or they know what happened. They're getting ready to make some moves, but they have to put out this narrative so that people that may be held accountable do not get suspicious and take off, or try to clean up that other mess that's going on, right? So if there's any other, you know, hanging chads out there that they have to take care of before they don't want anything to happen until they move. So they're putting out this line. Those were my two options when I saw this. Yeah, Todd, like that's why I said there's nothing to see here, the whole thing. I don't believe it. You know, Alex Jones had a whole post about how the former FBI director James Comey's daughter seemingly had the tapes, and then mysteriously, in a technical error, accidentally erased the tapes, or the tapes were destroyed by the former FBI director's daughter, which doesn't look good. And then you have both the guards. There's two guards that were supposed to be watching him that night that both fell asleep. Like, what are the odds that two guards, that this is their job, both fell asleep? Like, the odds are very, like, I don't believe that is what happened. But at the same time, I actually watched Tim Pool's reaction to this earlier, and he did bring up another scenario, which actually does make quite a bit of sense, and that is they're just telling you, if you watch what they said, they are just telling you what is in the file. They may not believe that the file is everything that's out there, but it's what is in the file. And right, and Dan Bongino put a statement out there too, but it's what's in the file. And so they have to give the official FBI narrative as to what they see in the file. When you look at the file, this is what it shows. It's not taking into account all these other weird aspects, but there is no real other evidence of what could have happened. It's disappointing to hear because, you know, these guys, Dan Bongino was a Epstien didn't kill himself guy for a long time, but you don't know if they necessarily believed he killed himself either. But they are looking at what's in the FBI's file. And because they did say if there becomes more evidence brought to light, then they will take that into account. But as of right now, he committed suicide. Now, I mean, there's a lot, there's too much at play that says that too many coincidences. At the same time, there's also another option that, yes, he did, that he could, here's another option that could have happened. He committed suicide, but while he was on suicide watch, because he had done horrific things and was on camera doing horrific things to children. And there's the option that, though, that they may have let him do it. Maybe, who knows if they got paid off, who knows what happened, but they let him do it. So maybe he did it. Maybe they helped, or, you know, maybe they helped him or kind of just turned the other cheek when he was about to do it because he had made a deal with them. That would be worth looking into at this point. I mean, but he had so much dirt on so many high profile people. This could just be them also just saying, hey, that's what the file says, but they also might be protecting certain leads in the background. Who knows? But I do know that, yeah, a lot of people, including me, this was really weird to see this yesterday, but after seeing some of the conversation around it, I don't know exactly where my head's at on it. I don't believe Epstein killed himself. There's too many coincidences there, but a lot of people are saying the same thing. They're saying I don't believe he did it, but I do trust Dan and Bongino and Patel. So a lot of people, I think, are thinking the same thing. I think a lot of people are thinking that there's just something that they're not telling us with the files, and so that's why it's that's why they're saying it to the T. They have to say according to the files. Basically, that's what it looks like. I don't know. But we'll move on to the breaking story. The big news story of the day is former President Joe Biden announced yesterday that he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, stage 4. It's an aggressive type of cancer that has already metastasized to the bone. So obviously this timing is a little bit weird, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the real question is that a lot of people are asking, and I have serious doubts about, and this is a huge deal, a huge scandal, because it goes back into what all did the media and the people around Joe Biden know? When did they know it? And why did they he was running for president a year ago. And odds are that they knew he had this cancer over a year ago. Odds are that they knew this and they were hiding. But which is not unforeseeable when you see that they hid his mental health decline completely. But you see a lot of, I mean, this is, it doesn't, you know, it's you know, it's sad. I mean, cancer is sad in and of itself, and you just pray for him as he's going through this. But I actually agree with what JD Vance said, where he said he doesn't even necessarily blame Joe Biden as much as he does those around him who hid it from the American people. Yeah, Grasshopper, we thought the mental health decline was the big scandal. This is just peak disturbing. Yes, and I mean, what there was a lot of signs out there. And it's just here, but this is one of the things. So what's interesting is Joe Biden seemed to tell us about this. Joe Biden himself seemed to tell us this 2 years ago. This was July 20th, or not 2 years ago, 3 years ago. July 20th, almost 3 years ago. July 20th, 2022. Joe Biden says,
off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer, and why can't for the longest time Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation. Off the window.
And remember, at the time, I mean, I said, hey, y'all, wouldn't this be a breaking news story that the president of the United States just said he has cancer? Like, wouldn't that be a story? That was my reaction when I saw this on July 20th of 2022. It's like, you would think. This was my post. I remember this post, and it was one of those things like, hey, wait, did the president just, and we talked about it. We talked about this on this show. Actually, we may not have. I don't know if I had this show yet. I remember talking about this clip though. I don't remember. I didn't talk about it on the show. I hadn't launched this show yet. So, but he seemingly told us, and this is the thing is, remember, they brushed it off as this is just one of Joe Biden's many gaffes that he had. He meant to talk about or they brushed it off as the malignant melanoma that he had. One second. That he had like melanoma going on that he had to have removed. Like he had different bouts of cancer type stuff at the time. Like he had other cancers removed from his body. One second. So remember, they brushed this off at the time, but and it could have been, but you know, I'm not a doctor. I don't know how these things go, but I did see this yesterday, and I thought it was interesting that, you know, they started talking about it, and they were talking about. There's a post from Dr. Stephen Quay who said prostate cancer is the easiest cancer to diagnose. And you think about Joe Biden has a medical team at his disposal. He's constantly getting checked for medical reasons, especially at his age. So how did they not find, there's no way that they did not know that he had prostate cancer. It's not something that would have been just passed on or passed up, right? But it says prostate cancer is the easiest to diagnose when it first starts, and to watch it progress to bone metastasis. The PSA blood test shows the rate of cancer growth for even with the most aggressive form. It is 5 to 7 year journey without treatment before it becomes metastatic. So before it even gets to this point, it's 5 to 7 years, even with the most aggressive forms. So it's odds are he probably had cancer. They probably knew he had prostate cancer when he was the probably before he was, but before he took office, they probably knew, most likely. And he still ran anyways. And knowing that he may only make it halfway through his term, and then Kamala Harris would have been the president. And then he tries to run again. Did they expect that he was gonna pass away in office from cancer, or that they were the plan was to get him reelected and then do the bait and switch for Kamala, because they knew that Kamala was not a popular candidate, but he didn't even make it to the election? I don't know. But he says, meaning it would be malpractice for his patient to show up and be first diagnosed with metastatic disease in May of 2025. It is highly likely he was carrying a diagnosis of prostate cancer throughout his White House tenure, and the American people were uninformed. And so Benny Johnson asked Grok, and I thought this was interesting. He asked Grok, is it possible to have a health medical diagnosis in July but have advanced prostate cancer spread to your bones by May? He said it is unlikely for prostate cancer to progress from healthy diagnosis in July 2024 to advanced bone metastasis by May 2025. As the disease typically takes years to reach that stage. Even in aggressive cases, medical literature suggests 5 to 15 years for metastasis, with rare high Gleason cancers possibly spreading in 1 to 3 years if undetected. Regular screenings, especially for high-profile individuals, should catch issues earlier. No evidence supports the July 2024 healthy diagnosis for Biden. His last report was February 2024, declaring him fit. Such rapid progression in 10 months is rare and raises questions about prior screenings or reporting accuracy. And, a lot of people I saw some people attacking Biden's doctor today, wanting him to be investigated. What did he know? When did he know it? Why didn't he alert people? But the problem is, even the president of the United States has HIPAA protections. So while you may think that we may all think that we have a right to know if the president of the United States is the leader of our country is not doing well. We have a right to know that, but at the same time, his doctor would lose his license if he told us, because the president of the United States has the authorization and medical privacy that the same as every other American citizen. He doesn't have to tell the American people his health status. It's like, but at the same time, there is a cover up going on there, though. When you see everybody else around him probably knew, and nobody told the press. Like, who did he tell, and why didn't they tell the press? This is just, it's another form of covering up his cognitive decline. And even now, hats off, I guess, even to MSNBC, who isn't taking this like partisanly. They had Dr. Zeke Emanuel on, who worked with, they said he worked with Biden, but he said he had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency. They knew. I
think you're an oncologist, obviously, incredibly respected. You believe that it is likely, just for those just tuning in, you believe it is likely, if this prostate cancer has spread to the bone, that he could have had it for up to a decade, but certainly it's likely. Would it be fair to say it's likely to have had this for at least several years?
Oh, more than several years. You don't get prostate cancer.
I just want to stop you. So this is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you were saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
I mean, this is a scandal, a cover up. Like I said, I wouldn't necessarily go after his doctor. The doctor can't really even tell you anything today because of the medical privacy stuff. He could lose his license. But there are a lot of people around Joe Biden, including Jill Biden, who covered this up. But covered up everything, like covered up the mental health decline that he had forever too. And then, saying like the media carried the water for him completely. And so here's the thing: is the timing of this is pretty odd, because you have a book is set to come out tomorrow from I want to say it's CNN's what book is it? I forget. So there's a book that's supposed to come out tomorrow called Original Sin: President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. And it's supposed to chronicle the complete cover-up of Biden's deteriorating mental health condition. This was supposed to come out tomorrow. So this whole thing, now you're starting to see, well, maybe they knew that this book is going to be pretty damaging in and of itself. So now they are trying to get out ahead of it and try to get the sympathy, try to distract the public with the sympathy vote that Biden, to reveal that he actually has cancer. And so we should be sympathetic to that and not try to damage and disparage this man in the last few years of his life. So this is what they're saying on CNN about this. Let me see. Oh, it's Jake Tapper's book, I believe.
Yeah. And look, there is the humanity of this, which I think we have certainly been able to get at in this conversation. There's also inherently kind of the politics piece of this, which is this was going to be a week where Joe Biden and his family were going to see the release of this book by our colleague Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, that focused a lot on his questions about his mental acuity and his fitness for office and all of these questions, which now, he has to deal with this announcement that he has this aggressive form of cancer.
It is terrible timing. I will say, it highlights the need for more transparency, medical transparency for our presidents, irrespective of party, irrespective of the individual. We need to know more. Just like we need to know more, I would have much greater transparency about their financial health as well. I want to see their tax returns, every bit of business. But we have a right. The third president, Thomas Jefferson, said, when a person becomes a public official, they become public property. And so I do think that's legitimate. I think Jake's book is going to be very important. It's terrible timing for President Biden as a guy and his family, and I hate that. But there are larger issues here. I will note, as an ardent Democrat, it's really important that I speak up and thank President Trump for his gracious statement. His son, Donald Jr., issued gracious statements. This is important. I'm not somebody who's generally a big Trump fan, but I do admire that President Trump today and his son put out public statements of support and encouragement for President Biden and his family. That's really important.
He says it's terrible timing. I think it's strategic timing. Yeah, Todd, that's actually I have that audio coming up here pretty soon. This was the same weekend as well as the Her audio tapes drop. And if you know what, so the Her audio tapes were when Biden was questioned about his son, his Hunter Biden's business dealings. Was it Robert Her? Her decided that they were not going to pursue charges against Joe Biden because if he took the stand, that people would just see him as this feeble old man. And we were like, wait a second, if he can't even take the stand because people are going to seem sympathetic to him because he can't even talk straight and can't do that, then how is he still the president of the United States? This is what we were saying at the time. And so that audio dropped this weekend. And this book is set to come out tomorrow. They needed a distraction, and they needed a sympathetic distraction. This is going, and so this isn't just me speculating, okay? This isn't just me speculating, because here is, I believe David Axelrod used to work for the Clintons, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I'd have to look that up. But David Axelrod suggests that the concerns over Biden's cognitive abilities and the cover up of that should be more muted and set aside now, given that he's struggling from cancer. Watch.
His medical condition now, his announced medical condition now, do you believe that silences or delays a lot of conversations about his, last year and a half of his presidency for now?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think those conversations are going to happen, but they should be more muted and set aside for now as he's struggling through this.
His medical condition now, his announcement.
No, I think this is exactly what I'm saying. They knew they needed the cover up, right? This is the sympathetic vote. This is the sympathetic distraction. The reason why they dropped this now was for people like David Axelrod to get out in front of the cameras and say, yeah, he's now dealing with this. We shouldn't burden him with we shouldn't burden this with the investigation into who knew what and when, who covered it up. And honestly, again, it's not as much about Joe Biden himself. It's more about the people that surrounded him, that covered this up, that hid his decline, including the people at CNN and the media who literally had blinders on. If they, like, how can you go on TV every day and say he looks great, or be with him and then say he's the best I've ever seen? And it's like you're asking the American people to not believe what they're seeing. Like, we saw that happen and it was covered up. And now you drop this the day before this book gets released by Jake Tapper, of all people, at CNN, who was kind of probably behind the scenes a lot of stuff, trying to cover, this book is a CYA book. Like, they're trying to cover themselves, and they're trying to be the ones to expose it so that they can try to get a little bit of credibility as journalists back, and to cover themselves, to be like, hey, we didn't cover this up. This is what we saw, everything like that. But this is what was going on behind the scenes. The drop here is strategic. And he's saying, oh, now that he's going through this. Well, when you look at everything we just looked at, he's been going through this for at least the last 4 years. Probably at the beginning, before he started his presidency, he's been dealing with this. He's been dealing with this in his entire presidency. And it is interesting because, if I'm not mistaken, I would have to look this up. I mean, I've seen people go through different types of cancers. Sometimes it does seem like cancers, people will almost develop. Some days they will develop and have these not amnesia. What am I thinking of? Dementia-like symptoms. where they forget what day it is. They forget who people are. I mean, I've seen it, but that was mostly like late stages of cancer that's happened. But it happens, and it wouldn't surprise me if some of this, you know, was part of the deterioration of his mental health as well. But because yeah, here we go. Let's play this. This is the Axio tapes that dropped this weekend of from Robert Herr's 2023 interview of Biden, which show repeated mental lapse as he struggles to remember words and dates amid long, uncomfortable pauses. White House didn't release it last year. All this, right? This is, again, why they said that he could not testify. He could not be brought up on charges because he would be seen as a, you know, as like a feeble old man by any jury that he was put in front of.
So during this time, we were living in Chambers Road, and there were documents related to the Penn Biden Center or the Biden or the cancer failure shot or your book. Where did you keep papers that related to those things that you were actively working on?
Well, I don't know. This is what, 2017, 18, that area?
Yes, sir.
Remember, in this time frame, my son is either been deployed or is dying. And so it was, and by the way, there were still a lot of people at the time when I got out of the Senate that were encouraging me to run in this period, except the president. Not a mean thing to say, but he just thought that she had a better shot of winning the presidency than I did. And so I hadn't,
2017,
at this point, even though I'm at Penn, I hadn't walked away from the
election was in 2016.
Office again. So if I ran again, I'd be running for president. And so what was happening though, when did Bo die? May 30th, 2018. Was it 2015 he died? 2015. It was 2015.
I'm not sure the months, but I think that was.
Yeah.
That's right.
So they're talking 2 years before he's even mentioned it.
What's happened in the meantime is that and Trump gets elected in November of 2017? 2016. All right. So, what did I have 2017 here?
That's when you left office in January of 2017.
Yeah, okay. But that's when Trump gets sworn in.
Right.
January.
Right. Correct.
Okay. Yeah. And in 2017, Bo had passed, and this is personal. The genesis of the book and the title, Promise Me Dad, was I know you're all close with your sons and daughters, but Bo was like my right arm, and that was my left. These guys were a year and a day apart, and they could finish each other's sentences. And Bo, I used to go home on the train in the period that I was still in the Senate. Anyway, do you remember? There was pressure, not pressure. Bo how much I adored him. And maybe it sounds so. Everybody knew how close we were. There was not anybody in the world who wondered whether or not. Anyway. And so.
I'm wondering if it's a good time to take a break. Briefly.
No, let me just keep going.
That's hard to listen to. But it shows just he was all over the place. The original question was, where do you know where you kept the papers? And he goes on this whole diatribe, not remembering dates, not remembering what's going on, and again, you don't. It's not Biden that we need to be concerned about. It was those around him, which is now starting to bring up all the issues. Who was running our government while all this was going on? Why was this hidden? And so now with these being dropped, with these tapes being dropped this last weekend, now we have the House Oversight Committee is now going to look into a lot of what happened in at the end of Biden's presidency. Now, what can they do? They're going to look at the auto pen stuff. So if you know an auto pen actually takes a pen and it'll sign stuff for you. Even senior leaders in the military have auto pens that they give that they are legally allowed to give certain people, ability to use the auto pen to sign documents and stuff for them with their permission. So they're saying, a lot of these pardons and bills and all this stuff at the end of his presidency were signed with, they're looking to see if it was signed with an auto pen. I don't know the legal grounds. I think I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. We're in kind of unprecedented times when it comes to what could be done. You would think that it could legally undo everything that had happened. Like it was like, what they're kind of saying is, right, so all these people within the administration were covering up Joe Biden's mental health decline, and they were the ones that were seemingly running the show. And then they pardoned themselves on the way out. So if anything came up, they were in the clear because they basically pardoned themselves because Joe Biden didn't actually sign the legislation, the pardons himself, or that he didn't even authorize the use of the auto pen. I don't know. This could be one of the biggest scandals we've ever seen, because again, it goes down to who was running our government when Joe Biden behind the scenes was talking like that. So here's what they're saying. Here's what James Comer said about what they're doing at the House Oversight Committee.
As tonight's tapes reveal, during an interview with Robert Hur, Biden launched into a very strange story about Mongolia. Have a listen.
I went to Mongolia and created pictures. I unfortunately embarrassed the hell out of the leader of Mongolia. They were doing what they would do at the time of the invasion of the Mongols into Europe in the 800s. And so we're out in the middle of nowhere, and you're looking up on the hill and see this tiny line. It's a 20-mile horse race with all these kids under the age of 16 on bareback racing to come down. And, they're sumo wrestlers and doing everything they do. And so they walked over and they had a target, big bales of hay 100 yards away.
Let's skip this a little bit. Let me see.
Gorillas. Good luck. I hate the guy.
Joins us now with the latest. All right, Chairman, you got your hands full. Tell us first, Chairman James Comer is launching an investigation into Biden's use of the auto pen. Chairman Comer joins us now with the latest. All right, Chairman, you got your hands full. Tell us first about what you announced earlier today about what you're doing with the auto pen, because I do some work with the Oversight Project. They were on this early, but you are going and looking at who is controlling this auto pen, because Joe Biden, I mean, he's demonstrating that he doesn't have all the cognitive capabilities they had. That interview was from 2023.
Yeah, that's hard evidence. Early in the President Biden's term as president, it clearly shows that he was in significant mental decline. It questions who was actually making the decisions. So what we found is not just with the pardons he issued, but many of the executive orders that the courts are now using to Trump-proof, many of the executive orders that President Trump is trying to implement to make government more efficient, many of these executive orders, as well as the pardons of Biden's entire family as a result of our investigation, these were all signed with the auto pen. And clearly from that interview, which was many, many months prior to the heavy use of the auto pen, Joe Biden wasn't capable of making decisions. He wasn't coherent. We think we've identified who the staffers are. Jason, you all have done great work with that over at Heritage Oversight. We're going to bring everyone that we believe was involved in any role in the use of the auto pen. We're going to invite them to come in for a transcribed interview. If they want, then they will receive a subpoena and they will have a full-blown deposition. But we want to find out who was actually making the decisions in the White House during the last 9 months of the Biden administration when he was clearly in mental decline.
And what do you make, where do we go next in terms of your investigation? There are senior staff there, starting with Jill Biden, right, the first lady. You have the chief of staff. You have Neera Tanden, who had these dual responsibilities and perhaps was in control of the auto pen. You have the cabinet. You have other senior staff that are interacting with them, but they were routinely directed and told us that Joe Biden, who was of clear cognitive capability, that he was sharp as a tack. And yet they went after and criticized Special Counsel Hur for his questioning and coming up with a summary that says, yeah, this is an old man who really has a hard time.
Yeah, I mean, that was breathtaking. That was her.
Yeah, who
being
knows,
nice
Ken? I think that's what they're
to
going
Joe
to figure
Biden,
out is
but
how many
born
were
in
actually
America.
signed.
Look, we've got a serious issue here with the President of the United States. Anytime people like me or Jim Jordan raise the question publicly whether or not Joe Biden was fit to serve as president, people like Jake Tapper and people in the legacy media attacked us. They called us insincere, rude, just the worst names in the world. Now they've all turned on a dime, and they're doing what we knew all along. They're trying to say, oh, there was a cover up. Someone covered up. We know there was a cover up. The media, as usual, the legacy media is late to the game. What we want to know is who was in the ringleader of the cover up, but who was making the decisions. I mean, there were some major decisions made by Joe Biden, especially in the last 3 months of his administration. Who made those decisions? Somebody has to give the authority to use the auto pen. Obviously, Joe Biden wasn't the one that stuck the papers and the pardons in the auto pen. Some staffer did that. Who authorized the staffer to do that? There's no paper trail. There's no evidence that we found that person was Joe Biden. So we're looking at the senior officials, and don't rule out Hunter Biden. He spent a lot of time in the Oval Office in the last 3 months. We know that from press accounts and from sources that were involved in the inner workings of the White House then.
Chairman Comer, one last question. That is about this interview, the Secret Service getting involved, bringing in, doing an interview with James Comey. All
right, we're not going to deal with that whole situation with Comey. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of questions that remain when it comes to the cognitive state and how it was covered up. And I don't know the legalese of it. So I'm going to learn as we go along, as they start this investigation, what this means. We'll see if they can overturn some of those pardons. Like, I mean, seeing Fauci's pardon overturned might be worth it in and of itself, because then we'll start to see some people getting arrested, which we'll see. So I was going to talk about this big, the one big beautiful bill that Trump is starting to push. It's not done yet. They worked through the weekend, and honestly, I just want to say Chip Roy is the one that's kind of out here fighting the good fight. He's in the budget committee, and showing the issues that come with this big, beautiful bill. It's not very beautiful. What they do is they load the tax cuts and the spending up front, and then 4 years later is when the cuts start. So basically, we will never see those cuts. This is what they always do. They load the spending, they load the tax cuts, but then we never see the real tax that come down, which is the spending. So spending is as Milton Friedman said, spending is the real tax. You're gonna the people are gonna pay that spending through inflation. So these tax cuts that they're boasting are gonna be worthless when we're paying inflation during the next presidency. And this is one of those things that President Trump did during his first administration. We saw $8 trillion in debt added. But he was able to play the system with the tax cuts. He was actually able to get more revenue to come in. So it kind of pushed off the inflation onto the Biden administration. And if Trump would have had a second term, he probably could have staved off the inflation through his second term as well. But here's, the Republicans voted for the tax cuts, but we also voted for massive spending cuts, the Doge cuts, everything there. We will never see the spending cuts that they're talking about in this bill. We won't. It won't happen. It's one of these things of, it's the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. We always do this type of stuff and expect different expect that the budget will come down, that the spending will come down, that the deficit will come down, and it never does. So I don't trust any of this. And thank God for people like Chip Roy, who I haven't actually watched this video, but so I'm watching it first with you. But he went on with Bannon's War Room to discuss this. Now I don't want to go too much deeper into this after this video, just because the bill's not done yet. Chip Roy voted present along with a couple others to get the bill out. They didn't block the bill from getting out of committee. And so it'll go to the floor, but they signaled present because there's still a lot of issues with the bill that they need to fix once it hits the floor and amendments to be made. So here,
work to do between now and then. We're making progress on two key areas that would change the extent to which it's backloaded. One of which, and I know you've got some views on this, and I think we share those views about how to get there, but on Medicaid, right? We want to make sure that the people that are the hardworking Americans, the working class Americans that need to be able to get access to care, especially in a post-Obamacare world where we've screwed up the entire system in the markets, that they have access. But we also think there ought to be work requirements that kick in immediately, because we think that's critically important to get people back in the labor force, drive up American workers so we're not so reliant on, all these people are trying to say that we got to import, the Chamber of Commerce people. We don't want to do that. So get people back to work. And then if they're working, then be able to have the benefits that they're getting under the program. That's critical. And the way the bill was designed is the work requirements didn't kick in until 2029. Well, that's ludicrous. That's after the Trump administration. So we're trying to move those up. So that would front load some of the savings. More importantly, I think it would create economic growth by getting people in the workforce. Second point is that we're trying to deal with the Inflation Reduction Act. The president campaigned on terminating it, ending it right out of the gate. And the truth is, as we started peeling it back, a lot of the projects are able to go, and a lot of the funding to all of these Green New Deal programs continue in perpetuity. There were $400 billion worth of continued flows for all of the Green New Deal projects that were put online that weren't even touched. And then there was, areas where new projects could start if they got started in the next 3 or 4 years. I was like, guys, that's not termination. I understand we have to make some grandfathered exceptions for investments and stuff that are attached to the grid, but we got to terminate it. So we're working through that today. And
so that's the issue. The front loading is going to be the thing. Is it going to be another $1 trillion bill? It could be. The way it's set up right now, it is a massive spending bill. It's going to increase. It will actually increase the deficit. I think they said $5 trillion. And so they have to, again, and that's because of the interest on the debt, because it will increase the debt ceiling $5 trillion. So basically, they're going to use it. So it's going to basically increase the debt $5 trillion, and then hope that but that's why we need the cuts up front. So you're not going to hit that debt ceiling. You're actually going to start moving downward, because the tax cuts, the way that tax cuts usually work is they do spark the economy to grow. They did this under the first Trump administration. The first Trump administration had record revenues, but then spent like crazy as well. So they kept continuously spending in the first administration too. So they had record revenues, but then they overspent the revenues that they were bringing in with massive spending bills. So hopefully we can, the tax cuts will spark economic growth like they did in the first administration, and then that will help bring in more revenue, which will actually help to drive down the deficit. That's the plan. But you can't cut taxes without cutting spending first. You just can't. So we'll talk about that probably next week. We've talked about it. We're going to go a little bit over tonight, but we'll talk about this real quick. Tariffs are coming out now. Tariffs are still hitting, and we're seeing these things happen. And Rand Paul is right on this. Here's what he said on ABC when he's talking about tariffs are taxes, and they are paid for by the consumer. We said this weeks ago that they are a pass-through cost paid on the consumers.
Walmart has warned that this will result in higher prices. What's your assessment?
Well, tariffs are taxes, and when you put a tax on a business, it's always passed through as a cost, so there will be higher prices. And I think this is what's important to know. People talk about, oh, this is America versus China. The U.S. doesn't trade with China. You trade with Walmart, or you trade with Target, or you trade with Amazon. Americans go in and buy a product. Now, it might come from China, but think about it this way. Think if the entire trade with China was all TVs. 1 million people go to Walmart. They all buy a TV. They like the quality. They like the price, and it happened to come from China. But then you draw a circle around China and the U.S., and you say, oh, my goodness, it's a trade deficit. We buy all of our TVs from over there. But each individual transaction, each individual who bought a TV was happy. But how can you draw a circle around 1 million happy people and say they all got ripped off? So there's an economic fallacy here. And the fallacy is that trade deficits actually mean anything. They're an artificial accounting. The only trade that means anything is the individual who buys something. That's the only real trade. And that, by very definition, if it's voluntary, is mutually beneficial, or the trade doesn't occur.
So that's what we've been talking about for a while. And so obviously with Walmart is now raising taxes or raising their prices like we said was going to happen. And so now, I mean, Justin Amash is absolutely right with this statement. Donald Trump is now stop the corp. Yeah. So the Republicans are now, and the conservatives are literally saying what the Democrats were saying back in November, that they were going to end corporate greed. Remember the whole idea we talked about 2 weeks ago when it came to Kamala Harris talking about her, we were talking about price caps. She was going to price cap grocery stores. Well, Donald Trump comes out and says Walmart should stop trying to blame tariffs as the reason for raising prices throughout the chain. Walmart made billions of dollars last year, far more than expected. Between Walmart and China, they should, as I said, eat the tariffs and not charge valued customers anything. I'll be watching it. This is Bernie Sanders language that Donald Trump is using. Let's be very clear about what he's saying. This is a threat. This is leftist Bernie Sanders style socialism language that says that's blaming corporate greed instead of economic factors. Again, businesses are so Walmart is in business to make money for its shareholders. That's it. tariffs, just like sales tax, is a pass-through cost. It is a cost that is going to raise the price. They have to keep a steady profit margin in order to stay in business, and they have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders. They don't have to eat these tariffs. This is literally like what Kamala Harris was saying last year on the campaign trail about grocery stores charging more for items because they became more expensive. They passed those costs on, and it's considered price gouging. Price gouging, and if you watch the show for a while, you know how I feel like price gouging is actually the cost of stuff. But this isn't the only time that Donald Trump in the last couple of weeks has given these leftist socialist answers that blame corporate greed, or these are liberal economic policies. So another example was everybody celebrating when Donald Trump said he was going to cap the prices of prescriptions. For many years, the world has wondered why prescription drugs and pharmaceuticals in the United States of America are so much higher than the prices in other nations, sometimes being 5 to 10 times more expensive than the same drug manufactured in the exact same laboratory. So he proposed he proposed that we wouldn't pay any more than any other country in the world, something like that. The problem is, it's our regulations. It's more expensive to come to market into the US. At the same time, they will say, oh, but the UK or Canada or all these other countries have lower tax or lower cost on prescription drugs than the United States because they have price caps. And just like the insulin price caps that Joe Biden implemented that caused shortages, the UK and Canada and these other countries actually have shortages in their medication, in their drugs and pharmaceuticals. We don't have shortages because the market is priced to what the people can afford, and they're only going to buy what they can get instead of hoard and take medications that they don't actually need. The idea, so price caps always cause shortages. I don't care who the president of the United States is and what side they're on. Walmart was always going to pass through that cost. Like I said months ago when we're talking about tariffs, when we talked about Amazon a couple weeks ago, that is what they do. It is a pass-through cost on the consumer. It's just like when we said when it's the exact same is when a corporation. So when the Bernie Sanders types blame corporate greed, and then they want to say that corporations don't pay enough in taxes. Well, corporations don't pay tax. I've been saying this for years. Corporations don't pay taxes. You pay the corporations taxes. You do. They pass that cost onto the consumer. They are always going to pass that cost on to the consumer because they have profit margins they need to make. If they can do it, they're going to make it. That's like the same. Again, it's the same thing. Raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, they either automate the job or they pass that cost to the consumer. Like all this stuff is basic economics. But it seems like it doesn't matter like what actual economics say. It's like depending on who is president and what side you're on, you agree with this stuff. The hypocrisy on both sides is really getting to be frustrating because you can see it. You could literally put this statement right here about Walmart right next to something Bernie Sanders said years ago, and they are exactly the same. It's so frustrating. Then you get these big spending bills, and again, I'm not. Call me. I mean, if somebody only sees this portion of the show tonight, they're gonna call me a progressive liberal, whatever. But if you watch, I literally spent most of this episode destroying Joe Biden and the people around him for covering up his mental health decline. It's just frustrating to see now the MAGA crowd celebrating the exact same stuff that they were literally condemning last year. It's frustrating. It's literally like both sides. There's like there's TDS, so Trump derangement syndrome, but there's like TAS, Trump admiration syndrome, where Trump can do no wrong to some people. It's absolutely wild to me. But all right, we already went over enough, and I'm done yelling about this. Again, I want to thank y'all for joining me. If you stuck around for this long, make sure you click that like and subscribe button. Follow me across all social media platforms, and I will see you next time.